They locked Thessa Brannor inside the snow den while she was
Feel
still
the
breathing.
power of the ancients.
Because North Vale Law preferred a cursed woman to die before anyone asked why the royal fires had gone cold again.
Power
Cold did not
stirs.
enter a royal hearth by itself.
What is that?
Someone had to open
Our
a path
only
for
hope.
it. And
We must
paths,
go
unlike
now.
curses, could
The
be
darkness
followed.
is coming.
The door was made of
We
black
will
pine,
face it.
iron
The
banded
wolf
and wolf
guides
carved,
us.
thick enough to keep screams inside and winter outside. But the snow den never needed to keep winter out. Winter already lived there. It did not create cold. It remembered where cold had been sent. The snow den was not a grave. It was an old record room built from winter. 2 royal guards dragged Thessa across the threshold and dropped her onto the frozen floor. She did not beg. That seemed to offend them more than crying would have. Her wrists were bound in white hide cord. Her cloak had been taken at judgment. Her dark hair clung to her pale face where melted snow had touched her skin and frozen again. Around her throat rested the mark everyone hated. A crescent-shaped stain of winter blue, visible just above the collar of her plain gray dress. The Winter Keeper had called it proof. Proof was easier to wear on a woman's throat than on a royal hearth. A throat could be sealed. A hearth could accuse. Thessa had called the mark a birth stain once, when she was too young to understand that frightened people trusted visible marks more than hidden hands. A mark could be pointed at. A hearth had to be investigated. A marked woman could be thrown into a den before dawn. A dead fire asked who had touched it last. High Winterkeeper Morkensen stood beyond the doorway with his silver staff planted in the snow. He wore white wolf fur over black robes, and the fur made him look holy until he moved. Then he looked like a knife wrapped in prayer. "Thessa Brannor," he said, voice calm enough to freeze deeper than wind. "By Snowden law, you are given to the cold until dawn. If the curse leaves your body before your breath does, the pack may accept your death as cleansing." Thessa lifted her head. "And if the cold came from somewhere else?" One guard struck her across the mouth. Not hard enough to break bone. Hard enough to remind everyone outside the door that cursed women were permitted questions only after they were dead. Alpha King Daven Irehold stood behind Morkant beneath the arch of Frostgate Keep. The winter storm moved around him without touching him, as if even wind knew the shape of a king. His black wolf cloak hung from one shoulder, fastened with a moon iron clasp. His hair was dark, his face severe, his eyes the pale amber of a predator watching from firelight. Tonight, he looked at her as if she were not a woman. Not yet, only a danger shaped like one. Morkant turned slightly toward him. "Majesty, the 3rd royal hearth died at moonrise. The old law requires a winter-marked vessel. A vessel could be blamed. A hearth would name the hand that emptied it. That was why Morkant needed a vessel before dawn." Thessa almost smiled. A vessel could be carried, sealed, emptied, buried. A woman made people hesitate. So the law had learned to name women as vessels before the freezing began. Daven's gaze moved to the mark at her throat. For one breath, something passed through his expression. Too quick to name. Not pity, not belief. A recognition he buried before it could become action. "Was she caught near the hearth?" he asked. Morkant answered at once. "She was found in the ash passage after the flame failed." "I was carrying coal," Thessa said. The guards shifted. Morkant did not. "Coal carried by a cursed hand becomes winter's invitation. That sounds easier than asking who let the fire die." Daven's eyes returned to hers. This time the look stayed longer. Morkant lifted his staff. "The condemned speaks with curse. Boldness." "No," Thessa said, though her split lip stung. "I speak while I still can." The snow den listened. That was the first strange thing. Not the guards. Not the nobles gathered in the courtyard. The den itself. The frost along the walls tightened into thin white lines, almost like old writing under ice. Thessa saw it because she was on the floor, close enough to the stone to notice what standing men ignored. Morkant saw her looking. His hand tightened on the staff. Daven saw that too. The Alpha King stepped closer to the doorway. "What did you see?" Thessa looked at the frost lines. They faded. Something under the ice. Morkant struck the threshold once with his staff. "The snow den shows dying minds what they deserve." Thessa looked at him. "Then why did it frighten you?" The silence after that did not belong to fear. It belonged to warning. Morcant's face hardened. Seal the den. Daven did not speak. That was his first cruelty. A king did not need to strike the door to help close it. His silence did not freeze her. It only gave the cold permission to finish what law had begun. The guards pulled the black pine door shut. The last thing Thessa saw before darkness took the entrance was the Alpha King's face, pale under stormlight, watching her with the expression of a man who had found a crack in a wall and chosen not to touch it. Then the iron bolt fell. Winter entered her lungs immediately. The snow den did not freeze like weather. It judged. It moved carefully into her fingers, her knees, her ribs. Thessa curled against the stone, bound hands pressed to her throat, trying to keep one small pocket of breath from breaking apart. Outside, the guards waited for morning. Inside, the frost lines returned. They glowed faintly under the ice, circling the floor around her body. She could not read them, but her bones reacted as if they remembered. Thessa's breath grew thinner. Once, twice. Then the den exhaled. A shape moved in the dark beside her. White fur appeared first, luminous against the black stone. Then a great wolf's head lowered in the frost light, eyes pale as winter stars, body massive enough to fill half the den. It did not curl around her. It did not warm her. It stood between her and the far wall, its body made of pale oathfire lines, as if the den had shaped the old hearth record into a wolf because Northvale only understood guilt when it wore teeth. Outside, men shouted. The door rattled. A spear struck the threshold and burst into white flame. The ancient hearth record wolf opened one eye toward the entrance. The snow den did not warm for her. It warmed only enough to reveal the oath line beneath the ice. The warmth was not mercy. It was evidence. Hearth fire drawn. Winter mark selected. Servant throat blamed. Royal cold concealed. The den had named the theft. It had not yet named the staff that opened the path. The snow den had not accepted Thessa as cursed. It had opened the first hearth record, and the cold inside the royal fires had followed a line no servant hand could have made. The snow den had opened a hearth record, but not yet named who sent winter into the royal fires. A path could name the thief. It could not yet name what the stolen fire was feeding. Thessa Brannor stayed curled on the frozen floor with her bound hands pressed against the winter blue mark at her throat. The cold had not stopped. The den had only warmed enough to show the white oath line beneath the ice, and even that small warmth felt less like comfort than exposure. Her fingertips were stiff. Her breath came thin and uneven. Frost clung to her lashes every time she blinked. The hearth record wolf stood between her and the far wall. It stood where the oath line vanished beneath the stone, not guarding, not choosing, only holding open what the law tried to close. Its white body was made of pale lines, each one burning like old writing under skin. When it moved, the den did not grow kinder. It only revealed more of the pattern beneath the ice. Northvale had shaped guilt into wolf form because Northvale understood teeth better than records, but the shape did not belong to mercy. Outside the iron-banded door, guards shouted over each other. "Open it! No one crosses that fire." It burned the spear clean through. The oath fire at the threshold stayed low and white, crawling along the floor like a border drawn by an old hand. It was not a shield. It was the edge of the record. High Winterkeeper Morcantsen's voice cut through the noise. "Stand back. The den is reacting to curse contamination." Thessa turned her face toward the door. Even through the wood and iron she heard the smoothness of him. Cursed contamination. A clean phrase for a dirty fear. Alpha King Daven Irehold stood somewhere beyond that door. She could feel his presence in the silence that followed Morcant's words. Kings changed rooms even when they did not speak. They made other men arrange themselves around the possibility of command. But Daven had already given the den his silence once. That silence was still inside with her. The frost lines beneath Thessa brightened again. They moved from the center of the floor toward the threshold, then curved away sharply, as if following a path that had entered the den from outside and returned to the royal hearths through stone. Thessa forced her frozen tongue against her teeth. "Read where the cold entered." Her voice was weak enough that she barely recognized it. The snow den heard. The hearth record wolf lowered its head. Its pale jaws opened, not to snarl, but to shape the oath line. White fire moved through the frost script beneath Thessa's body, traveling from the mark at her throat toward the door. Morkant struck the outside threshold with his staff. The den shook. "Hearth. Cold records cannot be tried through a cursed woman's throat," he said. The words entered the den and clung to the ice. Cursed woman's throat. Thessa pressed her bound hands harder against the winter mark. There it was again. The place where they had put the blame. Not her hands, which had carried coal. Not her feet, which had walked the ash passage. Her throat. The mark they could point to. The mark they could sentence. The snow den answered. Winterkeeper staff entered. Hearth oath line opened. Royal fire siphoned. Winter-marked vessel blamed. The den had named the staff. It had not yet named what the stolen royal fire fed. Outside, the guards stopped shouting. Silence moved through the courtyard like a blade pulled from its sheath. Daven's voice came next, lower than Morkant's, and far more dangerous. "Your staff entered the record," Morkant answered without hesitation. "My staff sealed the den according to law. The record says entered. Old Winterstone uses broad language, Majesty. The record says hearth oath line opened. For cleansing transfer. The record says royal fire siphoned. A pause. Small. Not enough for guilt. Enough for fear." Then Morkant said, "The pack survives winter because old law moves cold where it can be contained." Thessa laughed once. The sound tore at her chest. Contained. She looked at the oath line burning beneath the ice. It did not run from her body into the hearth. It ran from the royal fires into the den, then through the mark at her throat, teaching the court to see her as the source instead of the vessel chosen afterward. "You wanted my throat to carry the cold," she said. It carried the path, and paths did not end at blame. The hearth-record wolf lifted its head. The line beneath her throat flared. Her mark burned so cold she folded forward, breath-breaking. The den did not release her. The oath fire did not wrap around her. Evidence still needed contact, and the contact was pain. Outside, Daven spoke again. This time, his voice was not only anger, it was recognition turning against itself. "I let the den take her because a marked throat was easier to question than my dying hearths." The snow den accepted it. Royal silence entered. Marked throat questioned. Dying hearths avoided. The den did not forgive him for naming it. It only kept the line beside his silence. Thessa closed her eyes. Not in relief. Relief would have been too generous. His admission did not open the door. It did not loosen the hide cord. It did not return warmth to her hands. It only placed his silence inside the record beside Morkant's staff. Good. Let it stay there. Morkant struck the threshold again. Harder. White fire snapped across the door. "The record is unstable," he said. "The condemned has turned cursed delirium into accusation. Seal the threshold before the den spreads hearth." Panic through the courtyard. The iron bands groaned. A second layer of frost crawled over the doorway from outside, blacker than the first. Morkant was sealing it, not to keep Thessa in, but to keep the record from reaching the king. The hearth-record wolf turned toward the door. Its white-lined body flickered. For one moment, Thessa thought it might leap. It did not. It only lowered one paw onto the oath line and held the record open. Even that was not mercy. It was custody. The cold drove deeper into her ribs. Thessa forced herself to stay awake. The snow den read one final line through the ice before Morkant's black frost covered half the threshold. Morkant's staff had opened the hearth oath line, siphoned royal fire into the snow den, and left her winter-marked throat to carry the blame. The snow den had named Morkant's staff, but not what the siphoned royal fire was keeping alive. A stolen fire could feed a law. It could not explain why her throat had been waiting beside the dead hearth. Thessa Brannor lay curled beside the oath line, no warmer for knowing the path of the theft. The cold still held her fingers in its teeth. Her bound wrists ached against the white hide cord. The winter mark at her throat burned with a blue so deep it felt older than her skin, and each breath scraped the inside of her chest as if the den were teaching her lungs to become frost. The hearth-record wolf kept one paw on the glowing line beneath the ice. Not guarding, not comforting, only keeping custody of the record before Morkant could seal it shut. Custody was not mercy. It still left her body as the lock. Its pale body flickered where the oath line ran under the far wall. Thessa could see now that the wolf shape was not standing beside her because it cared whether she lived. It stood where the record vanished. And where the record vanished was where Morcant wanted the next question buried. Its body marked the place where stolen heat traveled beyond the den, beneath Frostgate Keep, toward whatever had been fed while the royal hearths died. Outside the iron-banded door, the guards had stopped trying to force the threshold. Morcant's black frost covered half the entrance. White oath fire pushed back from within. Between them, the door groaned like a jaw held open by two hands. Daven Irehold's voice came through the wood. "Move the frost back," Morcant answered, calm and hard. "Majesty, the den is spreading winter throat contamination. If the threshold is opened before the record settles, the curse may stain the court." Thessa pressed her cheek against the ice and smiled without warmth. Winter throat contamination. He could name her throat 100 ways and still not name the hand that used it. The oath line beneath the wolf's paw pulsed. Thessa dragged in one breath, then another. Her voice was thin, but it still belonged to her. "Read what the stolen fire fed," the Snowden answered slowly, not because it obeyed her, because her mark remained on the line of blame, and blame was the only doorway the law had left open. The frost script brightened under her throat. The hearth-record wolf lowered its head until its jaws hovered above the line, shaping the white flame without sound. Morcant struck the outer threshold with his staff. Fire-feeding records cannot be tried through a winter-marked throat. The den shook. Thessa's mark flared so cold she nearly lost the shape of the room. Her hands curled against her chest. She forced them back to her throat. The Snowden read. Royal fire stored. Den threshold fed. Winterkeeper staff warmed. King hearth starved. The den had named what the stolen fire fed. It had not yet named why Thessa had been sent to the ash passage. Outside, a chain dropped from someone's hand. Daven said nothing at first. That silence was not the same as before. The first silence had closed a door. This one stood before a door and understood too late what it had done. Morcant spoke into it. The den threshold must be fed during long winter. Stored fire prevents the old cold from breaching the keep. The record says my hearths were starved, Daven said. Redistributed. Starved. Majesty, royal fire belongs to the survival of Northvale. Thessa lifted her head with effort. You called me winter, because your law had eaten the fire. And then you made sure I was standing close enough to be blamed for the ashes. The oath line flashed beneath her. The hearth-record wolf's outline sharpened, not in protection, but in agreement with the line it held. Evidence did not love the wounded. It only refused to become clean for the powerful. Daven's breath sounded rough beyond the door. If my hearths were starved to feed this law, then my throne has warmed the den that condemns her. The snow den accepted it. Throne warmth entered. Den law fed. Condemned throat continuing. The last line was still hers to suffer. Thessa closed her eyes. Not in relief. Relief would have been too generous. His recognition did not loosen the cord. It did not thaw her hands. It did not make the den less hungry for contact. The record simply placed his throne beside her throat and kept reading through the pain. Morcant's staff struck the threshold again. Black frost surged inward, crawling across the white oath fire like ink dropped onto milk. The line under the wolf's paw dimmed at the edges. The king is being misled by curse. Reflection, Morcant said. Seal the oath line before the condemned turns necessary winter law into accusation. Daven moved. The white oath fire flared in warning. The den wrote across the door in frost-bright letters. Forced threshold break collapses fire-feeding record. Condemned throat remains source. Winterkeeper staff cleared. Daven stopped. Thessa could feel the violence in that stopping. It shook the air outside the door. The Alpha King could have torn through guards, frost, and pine. He could have made rescue look like power. But if he broke the threshold now, Morcant would walk away clean, and Thessa's throat would keep the blame. So she did the only thing left. She reached toward the hearth-record wolf. Not to touch it. To touch the line under its paw. Her fingers slid over ice. Skin split at the knuckles. Blood darkened against white frost, and the oath line brightened where her winter mark answered it. The wolf did not lean down to her. It did not comfort. It held the record. Holding still hurt because the record had been fastened through her mark. Again, she whispered. The snow den trembled. Morcant pulled his staff back, then drove it into the threshold with both hands. Black frost spilled over the oath line, trying to bury the destination beneath old law. The record burned through one final time before the line vanished under the seal. The royal fires had not died into winter. They had been drawn beneath Frostgate, stored in the snow den's oath threshold, and fed back through Morcant's staff while the king's own hearths were left cold enough to require another winter-marked throat. And another winter-marked throat did not arrive by accident. The snow den had shown what the stolen fire fed, but not why Thessa had been sent to the ash passage. The question stayed in the ice after Morcant's black frost sealed half the threshold. It glowed under the floor in a thin white pulse, traveling from the oath line beneath the hearth-record wolf's paw to the winter mark at Thessa's throat. Her body answered before her mind did. The mark burned colder, not brighter, and the pain told her the next record was not hidden in the royal hearths anymore. It was hidden in the reason she had been standing beside one. Thessa lay on her side, bound wrists pressed close to her chest, trying to breathe through the ache in her ribs. The den had not grown warmer. The oath fire had only exposed enough truth to make the cold more deliberate. Frost climbed her sleeves. Her fingertips had gone numb. Her split knuckles had left small, dark marks on the ice where she had reached for the line. The hearth-record wolf remained where it had been, one pale paw holding the oath line open, not shielding her, not claiming her, only keeping the record from being buried while the law tried to close its mouth. Outside the door, Daven Irehold had not moved again. Thessa could feel that restraint through the wood, through the tension in the guards, through the way Morcant's voice kept sharpening around the edges. The Alpha King had power enough to break stone, but the snow den had already warned him what force would cost. If he shattered the threshold, the record would collapse, and her throat would remain the source of winter in every official mouth. So he stood outside, and she froze inside. That was the shape of truth in Northvale. Morcant struck the threshold with the butt of his staff. The record is closing. Let it settle. The condemned has already corrupted enough winter law. Thessa pushed her elbow beneath her and forced herself upright. The room tilted. The hearth-record wolf flickered, and the oath line dimmed for a breath, as if her weakness had pulled the record towards sleep. She pressed her bound hands to the mark at her throat. The crescent there felt less like a curse now, and more like an iron tag buried beneath skin. A registry mark. A place for law to find her when it needed a body. She turned toward the door. Read why I was placed beside the dead hearth. Morcant answered before the den could. Assignment records cannot be tried through a winter-marked vessel. There it was. Vessel again. Not worker. Not witness. Not woman who had been sent to carry coal. Veshel. Thessa's breath shook out of her. You did not find me near the dead fire. You put me there. The snow den heard. The oath line beneath the wolf's paw flared white. A new pattern opened under the ice, not a path this time, but a grid of narrow lines. Names appeared and vanished too quickly to read, each one linked to a small crescent mark. Winter-marked servants, coal carriers, ash sweepers, hearth cleaners, bodies placed close to royal fires whenever old law needed a throat for blame. The den read. Winter-mark registry entered. Coal duty assigned. Third hearth starved. Marked vessel positioned. The words burned so clearly that even the guards outside must have seen the glow through the seams of the door. Daven's voice came low. Registry, Morcant replied. Winter-marked workers are tracked for safety. Tracked. For containment. Positioned. For duty. The hearth was already starved. Silence. This time, Morcant took one breath too long. Thessa closed her eyes, but the record kept shining against her lids. The third hearth had been dying before she reached the ash passage. Her coal duty had not been ordinary. Her name had been pulled from a registry of marked throats and placed beside a royal fire already hollowed out by siphon. The law had not discovered her at the crime. It had arranged her into it. Daven spoke again, and the words came as if each one had to pass through iron. If her duty was assigned after the hearth was starved, then my law placed her beside the crime before it named her as curse. The snow den accepted it. Royal law entered. Marked vessel positioned. King recognition continuing. Thessa looked at the last line. Continuing. Always. The record made sure the powerful did not get clean endings too soon. Daven had recognized the trap. That did not thaw her throat. It did not erase the registry. It did not unplace her beside the dead hearth. Morcant's staff scraped across the threshold. Black frost surged through the door seams, sliding over the white light like a lid over an eye. Assignment lines are administrative, he said. They cannot outweigh visible curse, mark evidence. Thessa's laugh came out thin and broken. You made the visible thing convenient. The hearth record wolf lowered its head. The registry grid brightened beneath the ice. Morcant struck again. The den shook hard enough to send frost dust from the ceiling. The white oath line buckled. Thessa's body folded around the pain in her throat, and for a moment she thought the record would close with her trapped inside the accusation it had only begun to undo. Daven moved outside. The door flashed. Force threshold break collapses assignment record. Marked vessel remains source. Winterkeeper registry sealed. He stopped. Thessa hated how grateful part of her almost became. She crushed it. Stopping was not rescue. It was only not ruining the proof she was paying for. She pressed her throat mark to the ice. The cold bit deep enough to make her vision burst white. Again, she whispered. The snow den answered through the hearth record wolf, through the oath line, through the registry grid Morcant tried to bury. Morcant's Wintermark registry had assigned her coal duty beside the third hearth after the siphon began, placing a marked throat next to the dying flame so Northvale law could mistake a prepared witness for a curse. The registry had placed Thessa beside the dying hearth, but not yet named why marked throats were kept close to royal fire. The answer waited under the ice. Thessa felt it in the burning crescent at her throat, in the white lines spreading from the registry grid beneath her body, in the way the hearth record wolf held its paw over the oath line like a keeper of a door no living hand could open cleanly. The cold had begun to change. It was no less deadly, but it had become more precise. It did not simply freeze her now. It searched. Her breath came in shallow cuts. The hide cord around her wrists had stiffened with frost. Her knuckles bled where the ice had split them. She could not feel 3 fingers on her left hand, but the mark at her throat remained violently awake, as if the den cared more for the place Northvale had named Curse than for the woman carrying it. Outside the door, Morcant's voice sharpened. The registry line is corrupted. Seal it before the condemned forces old family marks into public law. Old family marks. Thessa opened her eyes. She had never been told her mark was old. Only cursed. Only shameful. Only dangerous near hearthfire. As a child, she had watched other winter-marked families lower collars in market squares so no royal inspector would notice too quickly. Her mother had once pressed a hand over Thessa's throat and whispered, "Keep warm where they tell you to stand cold." Thessa had not understood. Now the snow den did. Daven's voice came from beyond the threshold. "What old family marks?" Morcant answered. "Winter marks appear in unstable bloodlines. The registry prevents harm." The hearth record wolf's white outline tightened. Thessa forced her frozen lips apart. "Read what the mark was before your registry named it Curse." Morcant struck the door with his staff. "Lineage records cannot be tried through a condemned vessel." The snow den pulsed. Condemned vessel entered. Thessa pressed her throat mark against the ice until the cold burned black at the edges of her sight. "Read it," the den read. Winter oath line entered. Hearth witness duty assigned. Cold breach watched. Royal Oathkeeper family reduced. The words appeared slowly, each one carved in white fire beneath the frost. Winter oath line. Not curse. Not disease. Not danger born in blood. Oath. Thessa's breath broke. The hearth record wolf lifted its head. And for the first time, its shape looked less like a beast and more like a seal. Lines of oath fire ran through its ribs, forming words too old for her to read, but not too old for her body to remember. Outside, Daven spoke. "Oathkeeper family." Morcant's reply came fast. "Ancient terminology. The winter marked were once assigned to observe hearth instability. Their later corruption required containment." Thessa laughed, weak and sharp. "Observe." The mark at her throat flared. "My family did not make the cold," she said. We were made to witness where it entered. The snow den answered. Witness entered. Morcant's staff slammed the threshold. The black frost pushed farther through the seams. The registry grid flickered. Names appeared beneath the ice, then vanished under Morcant's seal. Brannor, Vey, Kest, Lorne, Ashmere. Not noble houses. Not throne lines. Winter-marked families tracked and placed near failing hearths until every witness could be turned into cause. Daven's voice dropped. You reduced oathkeepers into condemned vessels. Morcant did not hesitate. The throne required order. A witness class that common people trusted more than winterkeepers would fracture hearth authority. There it was. Not safety. Authority. The snow den burned brighter. Hearth authority entered. Thessa closed her eyes against the pain. Daven did not get to sound clean now. His throne had inherited that authority. His guards enforced it. His silence had let Morcant call her throat a vessel, while the old record knew it as witness. The den read again. Oathkeeper standing denied. Winterkeeper office sustained. Marked families positioned. Blame cycle preserved. The final line sank into the ice like a nail. Blame cycle preserved. Thessa understood then why the snow den had not warmed enough to save her. A record room did not free the witness while the cycle remained intact. It only held the wound open until the law that used it could be read. Daven moved outside the door. The threshold flared white. Forced entry collapses lineage record. Oathkeeper standing lost. Condemned vessel remains source. He stopped. A sound left him, low and dangerous, almost a growl. But Thessa did not let herself cling to it. Anger outside the door was not breath inside her lungs. Morcant pulled his staff back. Majesty, old oath terminology changes nothing. The condemned is still winter-marked. The royal hearths still died. North Vale still needs cleansing. Thessa looked at the hearth record wolf. It did not look back with comfort. It held the line, so she held herself against it. You did not fear my curse, she said. You feared what my family was made to remember. The snow den accepted it. Memory feared. Oath witness active. Throat contact continuing. Continuing. The word cut through her more cleanly than the cold. Daven read it through the door seams. If her mark is oath witness, then my law has been killing the people meant to prove where winter entered. The den wrote his words beside hers. Royal law implicated. Thessa's vision darkened at the edges. Morcant struck the threshold so hard the black pine cracked. White oath fire bent inward. The hearth record wolf flickered, its shape breaking into lines. Thessa pressed her bound hands to the mark at her throat and forced one more breath through the cold. The snow den had not registered winter-marked families because they carried a curse. It had tracked the old winter oath lines, stripped them of witness standing, and placed them beside dying hearths so the throne could keep using their marked throats as blame. The lineage record broke open beneath the ice, and the snow den showed Thessa the shape of an oath older than the law that condemned her. It was not written like a sentence. It was carved like a wound. White lines spread from her winter-marked throat to the hearth record wolf's paw. Then from the wolf into the far wall where the stolen fire disappeared under Frostgate. The old names had faded, but the pattern remained. Marked families beside hearths. Not as vessels. Not as curses. But as witnesses placed where royal warmth could be measured before winter was blamed on the weak. Thessa's body shook against the floor. The den had taken too much cold from her lungs. Every record made her mark burn deeper. Every answer kept her alive only enough to suffer the next question. The hearth record wolf did not lower itself to warm her. It stood rigid over the oath line, white fire running through its ribs, keeping the old proof from closing. Outside, Morcant Sen's staff scraped hard against the threshold. Lineage readings are concluded, he said. No standing can be restored through a condemned throat. Daven's voice came after a silence. The den named them oath witnesses. The den used archaic language. The den named my law as the thing that stripped them. Your law preserved the pack. Thessa forced her frozen hand to the mark at her throat. Her fingers barely obeyed. Read what the oath required. Morcant struck the door. Oath origin records cannot be tried through a winter-marked body. The words passed through the wood and settled over the ice. Winter-marked body. Not even throat now. Bode. The law kept shrinking her until only useful surfaces remained. The snow den pulsed. Winter-marked body entered. Thessa pressed her throat harder to the ice. Read it. The hearth-record wolf opened its pale jaws. The floor answered. First winter oath entered. Marked breath witnessed hearth failure. Alpha throne required to answer cold. Witness harm forbidden. The last line burned brighter than the rest. Witness harm forbidden. Thessa stared at it until the white light blurred. Witness harm forbidden. Every winter-marked woman dragged into the snow den. Every marked child taught to hide their throat. Every family listed, assigned, positioned, blamed. Every frozen body called cleansing. All of it had not been old law. It had been the breaking of one. Outside, no one spoke. Then Daven's voice came, low and rough. Witness harm forbidden. Morcant answered. The oath predates the Great Famine winter. Emergency revisions superseded it. The den rang. Emergency revisions entered. Thessa closed her eyes. There was always another clean phrase. Cleansing. Containment. Redistribution. Revision. Each word made a grave sound administrative before the body reached it. The snow den continued. Famine winter invoked. Oathkeepers standing suspended. Snow den sentence expanded. Royal survival prioritized. Daven said. My throne survived by suspending the witness oath. Your throne survived because winterkeepers understood necessity. And then necessity became law. Morcant did not answer quickly enough. The hearth-record wolf's outline sharpened. Thessa dragged in a shallow breath. How many winters? The den shook. Morcant's staff slammed the threshold. Count records are sealed. Thessa almost smiled. Sealed meant present. The snow den read. 17 winters entered. Marked witnesses sentenced. Royal hearth failures concealed. Winterkeeper authority strengthened. 17. The number entered Thessa's chest more cruelly than cold. Her mother had died in the 14th winter. Her older brother had vanished in the 16th. Taken to repair a north hearth, and returned as a wooden box sealed with white wax. Thessa had been assigned coal duty in the 17th. A pattern, not misfortune. A harvest, not cleansing. Her throat mark burned so sharply that she gasped without sound. Daven heard enough of the broken breath through the door to move. The threshold flared. Forced entry collapses oath origin record. 17 winter count sealed. Condemned body remains source. He stopped. Again. Thessa hated that she needed him to. Morcant spoke fast now. Majesty, the condemned is weaponizing grief through oath fire. Daven's answer came like iron dragged over stone. No. My law has been weaponizing her family through winter. The snow den accepted it. Royal law weaponized. Marked family harm entered. Thessa saw the line and held it inside herself. Not forgiveness. Not comfort. Record. Morcant's voice sharpened. Then command the den to release its false reading. I cannot command a record to become false because it has named my house. The pack will hear this. Good. The pack will ask what fed the throne each winter. Daven did not answer. That silence was not guiltless. It was heavy with the knowledge that some questions had waited outside his door for years, while marked throats froze in his name. Thessa pressed both bound hands to the ice. Her body was failing. The hearth-record wolf lowered its paw harder onto the oath line, and the line flared through her mark. Not mercy. Custody. Still custody. Read what broke the oath first, she whispered. The den trembled. Morcant struck the threshold with both hands on the staff. Black frost surged over the white lines, swallowing first winter oath, then witness harm forbidden, then 17 winters entered. The hearth-record wolf flickered into broken strokes of light. Before the seal covered it, the snow den forced one final record through Thessa's burning mark. The first winter oath had forbidden harm to marked witnesses, but the Alpha throne suspended that oath during famine, and winterkeepers turned the suspension into 17 winters of law so royal hearth failures could be hidden behind frozen bodies. 17 winters stayed burning in the door seams after Morcant's black frost swallowed the older oath. The number would not go dark. It clung to the iron bands, to the threshold, to the white oath line under the hearth-record wolf's paw. It even glowed against Thessa Brannor's throat mark, as if the den wanted her body to remember every winter her family had been turned from witness into offering. Thessa could no longer feel the floor beneath half her body. The cold had climbed beyond her fingers and knees. It had entered the slow places, elbows, ribs, the hollow behind her eyes. Her breath came shallow, less like breathing than borrowing air from a room that did not intend to let her keep it. The hearth-record wolf remained in place. Its shape flickered under Morcant's seal, ribs of oath fire breaking apart and reforming over the line. It did not move closer to her. It did not bend its head over her hands. It only kept the record from closing completely, a pale custody of truth that still required her body as the lock. Outside, Daven Irehold spoke through the sealed door. The famine ended. Morcant did not answer. That was answer enough. Daven's voice lowered. The great famine winter ended before my father died. The hunger ended, Morcant said at last. Winter did not. Do not dress theft as weather. The pack required continuity. The snow den pulsed. Continuity entered. Thessa almost laughed. But the cold stole the strength before sound could form. Continuity. Another clean word. Another white cloth over frozen bodies. If famine justified one broken oath, continuity made sure the breaking never had to stop. She pressed her bound hands to her throat mark. Her skin had gone numb around it. But the mark still burned. It burned because the record still knew where Northvale had placed the blame. Read who kept the suspension alive, she whispered. Morcant's staff struck the threshold. Continuance records cannot be tried through a condemned winter body. The den answered at once. Condemned winter body entered. Thessa closed her eyes. The law kept naming her by what it had done to her. The hearth-record wolf opened its pale jaws, and the oath line ran through them like breath made of white fire. The snow den read. Famine end recorded. Oath review required. Winterkeeper continuance filed. Royal review bypassed. Outside, the guards made no sound. The words did not accuse loudly. They did something worse. They explained. Daven's breath hit the other side of the door. Royal review bypassed, Morcant replied. The throne was unstable after your father's death. Continuance preserved order. I was crowned before the third winter. New kings inherit unfinished necessity. The den rang. Necessity inherited entered. Thessa opened her eyes. Daven had inherited more than a throne. He had inherited a machine that made marked bodies into heat and called the result survival. But inheritance did not erase his part. He had sat on that throne through years of snow den sentences. He had heard winter-marked names read in judgment. He had allowed the law to keep working because royal hearths failed, and marked throats were easier to punish than royal systems were to question. Daven heard it too. If review was required, he said, then my silence each winter let the bypass stand. The snow den accepted it. Royal silence renewed. Oath review avoided. Marked bodies continuing. Thessa stared at the final line. Continuing. The word had become colder than the den. Morcant's voice sharpened. Majesty, the condemned is using old procedural fragments to turn lawful preservation into accusation. Thessa's lips parted. Preservation, she breathed. You preserved the part that fed you. The oath line flared. Morcant struck the threshold again. The black frost pushed farther inward. White fire bent beneath it. Thinner now. The hearth-record wolf's front leg broke into lines and reassembled badly, as if the seal had damaged the shape holding the record. Daven moved outside. The warning wrote itself before he reached the door. Forced threshold break collapses continuance record. Bypass sealed. Condemned body remains payment. He stopped. Thessa hated the last line most. Payment. There it was. Not vessel. Not curse. Not even witness. Payment. The den had finally named what the law had been spending. She forced her freezing hand toward the line beneath the wolf. Her fingers dragged uselessly at first. Then her wrist moved. The hide cord scraped her skin raw. She pressed 2 fingertips onto the oath fire. Pain returned all at once. She nearly fainted from the mercy of feeling and the cruelty of what caused it. Read what the payments fed after famine, she said. Morcant's voice cracked for the first time. No. Not doctrine. Not procedure. No. Daven heard it. Let the record answer. Morcant slammed his staff into the threshold with both hands. The record answers through a dying curse-bearer. The snow den pulsed. Dying curse-bearer entered. Thessa smiled faintly against the ice. Then why are you afraid it can still count? The hearth-record wolf set its broken paw harder onto the line. The den read. Snow den sentence renewed. Royal hearth debt reduced. Winterkeeper staff strengthened. Oathkeeper blood balance maintained. Blood balance. Thessa's stomach twisted. Her family had not only carried blame. Their deaths balanced a debt the hearths owed. Each winter-marked body placed in the den allowed royal hearth failure to be counted as paid, not repaired. Northvale did not survive by cleansing curses. It survived by accounting them downward until the dead could not object. Daven's voice came like a blade through cloth. My throne paid hearth debt with marked blood. The den wrote. Throne debt entered. Morcant pulled the staff back. Black frost surged, swallowing the new lines before they could spread beyond the threshold. Thessa pressed her throat mark to the ice one last time. Her vision darkening, her breath almost gone. The snow den forced the record through before Morcant's seal closed over it. The famine had ended, but the Winterkeeper continuance kept the broken oath alive. Bypassing royal review each winter so marked bodies could keep paying the hearth debt that Daven's throne never repaired. The black frost sealed the newest lines, but it could not hide the word debt. It stayed burning beneath the ice after the rest of the record dimmed. Small and white and terrible, close to Thessa Brannor's throat mark. The snow den had named what marked bodies had paid. It had not yet named who had owed the payment. Thessa lay almost flat now. The cold had taken the shape of her hands. Her fingers no longer belonged fully to her. Her breath came so slowly that each one felt counted before it left her mouth. The hide cord at her wrists had frozen stiff, locking her arms close to her chest. Only the crescent at her throat remained awake, burning with a pain so sharp it kept her from slipping into the dark. The hearth-record wolf stood broken over the oath line. One foreleg flickered. Its ribs were no longer whole. White oath fire ran through its body in jagged strokes where Morcant's seal had damaged the record. It did not heal itself. It did not come to her. It held the line because the line still had something left to say. Outside the door, Daven Irehold's voice came low. What hearth debt? Morcantsen answered too quickly. Emergency winter accounting. Old language. Nothing more. Thessa's lips moved against the ice. Old language is where your law hides the body. The den heard. Debt brightened. Morcant struck the threshold with his staff. Debt records cannot be tried through a dying, winter-marked vessel. The snow den pulsed. Dying vessel entered. Thessa closed her eyes. Even now he would not call her woman. Even now. While the den read bodies as payment, and the king stood outside hearing his throne named debtor, Morcant needed her reduced to a container. A vessel could be emptied. A vessel could crack. A vessel could be replaced before dawn. Thessa pressed her throat mark harder to the ice. Read who owed the debt. The hearth-record wolf lowered its broken head. The oath line burned through the floor. The snow den read. Alpha hearth oath entered. Royal blood required to repair breach. Winterkeeper transfer filed. Marked body payment substituted. For a moment, even the storm outside seemed to stop moving. Royal blood required. Daven made no sound. That was worse than anger. Thessa opened her eyes and looked toward the door, though she could see only black pine and frost. The Alpha throne had not needed her body because she carried winter. It had needed her body because someone had replaced royal obligation with marked payment. Her throat had not been chosen by magic. It had been selected by accounting. Morcant's staff scraped across the threshold. Symbolic royal blood. Ceremonial. Not literal. The den rang once. Royal blood required repeated. Daven's voice lowered. My blood was the repair. The throne's bloodline anchors the hearths, Morcant said. The Winterkeeper office administers practical substitutes when direct repair risks sovereign weakness. Substitutes. Necessary substitutes. Marked bodies. Morcant did not answer. The silence entered the den like another frost. The snow den wrote. Necessary substitute entered. Marked body payment confirmed. Thessa's mouth was dry. Her voice came as a thread. You did not protect the king from weakness. You protected him from cost. The line beneath her throat flared. Outside, Daven inhaled sharply. She wished that had meant something warm. It did not. The record continued to take its warmth from her pain. Daven spoke after a long moment. If my throne owed repair, then every marked body paid my debt. The den accepted it. Royal debt entered. Marked payment entered. Condemned throat continuing. Thessa stared at the final line until it blurred. Continuing. Again. His confession did not pay the debt back. It did not thaw the dead. It did not lift her from the floor. It only placed his debt where the record could not pretend it had been hers. Morcant slammed his staff into the threshold. The black frost surged inward, covering the lower half of the door, swallowing the old registry grid and half the oath line. The hearth record wolf's broken head dimmed. Majesty, Morcant said, voice sharp with controlled fear. If royal blood repair is invoked, the throne will be weakened before every rival pack watching this winter. Northvale cannot survive a king bleeding into old stone for a condemned woman. Thessa breathed out a broken laugh. Not for me. The den pulsed. Not for her entered. She forced her eyes open. For the debt. Daven said nothing. She hated how much she wanted him to answer. Then his voice came, closer to the door. If I break the threshold, the record collapses. The warning answered before the den had to. Forced threshold break restores marked payment. Royal debt sealed. Condemned vessel remains source. Daven stopped again. Thessa's throat burned hotter than the rest of her frozen body. Then do not break it, she whispered. The hearth record wolf lifted its broken paw, revealing one more line beneath the ice. It was not a path. It was a circle cut into the threshold itself, just outside the door, where a king might stand without entering. Daven saw it through the seams. Morcant saw it too. His voice turned cold. No. Thessa smiled faintly. There was no doctrine in that word. No old law. Only fear. The snow den read the circle before Morcant's staff could strike again. Royal repair place entered. Threshold blood accepted. Door must remain sealed until debt names payer. Daven's shadow fell across the lower seam of the door. Thessa could not see him draw a blade, but she heard metal leave its sheath. Morcant's voice rose. Majesty, do not let a dying marked woman turn your blood into winter law. Goad. S. Daven answered low and clear. My law already turned hers into payment. The hearth record wolf set its paw back onto the line. The snow den burned one final record through the frost. The hearth debt had never belonged to the winter-marked families. It belonged to the Alpha throne, and the snow den would not release Thessa from blame until royal blood stood at the threshold and named itself the payer. The knife left Daven Irehold's sheath with a sound too clean for the storm around it. No guard moved. No noble spoke. Even Morcant Sen seemed to understand, for one suspended breath, that the Alpha King standing before the snow den threshold was not reaching for a weapon against another man. He was reaching for the part of the law that had never been allowed to bleed. Inside the den, Thessa Brannor heard the blade before she understood what it meant. Her vision had narrowed to the white line beneath the hearth record wolf's paw. The rest of the chamber had softened at the edges, dark and cold, as if the snow den were slowly becoming the only world left. Her throat mark burned. Her wrists had gone numb beneath the frozen hide cord. Each breath felt borrowed from a body already halfway claimed by stone. The hearth record wolf did not look at her. It kept its broken paw on the oath line. Custody, not mercy. Record, not rescue. Outside, Morcant's voice sharpened. Majesty, royal blood cannot be submitted to a condemned winter chamber under unstable accusation. Daven answered, the chamber named the debt. The chamber reads through a marked vessel. The vessel carried a debt my throne refused to pay. The snow den pulsed. Marked vessel entered. Royal debt repeated. Thessa forced her eyes open. She wanted to tell him not to sound noble. Not now. Not while she was still lying in the den that his law had fed. But her voice came only as a shallow scrape. The den heard anyway. Witness objection entered. Daven went very still outside the door. Good. Let even her broken breath interrupt him. He lowered his voice, not to the court but to the threshold. I do not pay this through her. Morcant laughed once, cold and controlled. You cannot choose how old winter accepts repair. No, Daven said. But I can refuse to let her body remain the account. Then metal cut flesh. The scent reached Thessa before the record did. Warm blood. Not much. Not enough to fill a cup. Only a king's palm opened across a blade. Yet the snow den reacted as if a buried sun had touched the stone. White fire ran along the threshold. The hearth-record wolf lifted its head. For the first time, the oath line moved away from Thessa's throat and toward the door. The den read. Royal blood entered. Threshold repair invoked. Hearth debt payer named. Marked payment challenged. Thessa's eyes stung, and she hated that too. Challenged was not ended. Entered was not paid. The den was careful. Records were always careful when bodies were the price. Morcant struck his staff against the threshold so hard the black frost cracked outward in jagged lines. Challenge is not voidance. The Winterkeeper continuance remains active until the debt is balanced. Daven's blood slid beneath the doorseam. The den took it, not as warmth for Thessa, not as mercy, as evidence. The blood followed the oath line, burning red-white under the ice, and stopped just before the mark at her throat. It did not touch her skin. It did not heal her. It stood beside the place where blame had been fastened, and named itself Other. The snow den read again. Royal payer present. Marked throat disputed. Debt balance incomplete. Winterkeeper staff retaining transfer. Morcan's staff glowed beneath the black frost. Thessa saw it through the ice now, not outside but inside the record. A silver staff, warmed by stolen fire, wrapped with thin white lines that looked like prayer until the den revealed them as hooks. Each hook had held a winter-marked name. Each hook had dragged payment away from the throne and downward into bodies like hers. She forced her mouth to move. "Read the staff's account." Morcant shouted. "No." The word struck the threshold before doctrine could cover it. Daven heard it. The den heard it. The hearth-record wolf's broken ribs flared with white fire. Morcant recovered fast. Staff accounts cannot be tried through a dying, condemned woman. Thessa's fingers twitched against the ice. Still dying. Still condemned. Even with royal blood at the door, Morcant needed her reduced enough that the staff could remain clean. Daven's voice turned dangerous. She asked the den to read. "She has no standing to compel. I gave mine to the threshold. The snow den accepted it. Royal standing lent. Witness contact active." Thessa closed her eyes against the pain. Lent. Not transferred. Not enough. But something. The den read through the bloodline at the door and the mark at her throat. Winterkeeper staff account entered. Marked payments received. Royal debt deferred. Staff authority increased. The courtyard beyond the door changed. Thessa could not see the nobles, but she heard the sound of many bodies understanding too late that Morcant's holiness had been warmed by other people's freezing. Daven spoke softly. "You grew stronger each winter," Morcant answered. "The office grew necessary. The office fed. The office preserved the pack." Thessa whispered. "It fed on the repair that should have come from you." Silence followed. Not because she was loud. Because the den carried the words across the line. The snow den wrote them in white fire. Repair diverted. Royal debt deferred. Morcant's staff flared black. The hearth-record wolf's body shattered halfway into lines, then reformed with difficulty. The record was weakening. Thessa felt it in her throat, in her lungs, in the way the floor seemed to tilt beneath her. If the line broke now, her body would become the source again, and Daven's blood would be called unstable royal grief. Morcant knew it. He drove his staff against the threshold. Black frost rushed inward, swallowing Daven's bloodline inch by inch. "Enough," Morcant said. "The king's blood has entered. The rite may close under Winterkeeper supervision." Daven said, "No. Majesté. No more supervision by the office named in the debt." The den pulsed. Office named in debt entered. Thessa dragged her bound hands toward the throat mark. Her body barely obeyed. She pressed the mark to the ice one more time. "Read what completes it," she whispered. The snow den hesitated. Then the hearth-record wolf opened its broken jaws, and the final line of the payment ledger burned between Thessa's throat and Daven's blood at the threshold. Royal blood named the payer, but the debt could not be repaired while Morcan's staff still held the marked payments. The Winterkeeper's account had to be broken before the snow den would stop calling Thessa Brannor the source of winter. Morcant's staff began to ring with the names it had eaten. Not allowed. The sound moved through the ice, through the threshold, through the line of Daven's blood still burning beneath the door. Each pulse made the staff glow hotter in Morcant's hand. And inside the snow den, Thessa Brannor saw the old payments wake as pale marks under the frost. Brannor, Vey, Kest, Lorne, Ashmere, and others too damaged by winter law to read cleanly. They were not spirits. They were accounts. Bodies counted as payment because royal blood had been deferred too long. Thessa lay with her throat against the ice, barely able to keep her eyes open. The hearth-record wolf stood over the oath line in broken pieces, its shape held together by white fire and old duty. It had not saved her. It had only refused to let the record close before the debt named its true holder. Outside the door, Morcant's voice came sharp and strained. Majesty, the staff is the lawful vessel of Winterkeeper accounts. To break it during active winter balance is to endanger every hearth in Northvale. Daven's answer was colder than the storm. Every hearth has already been endangered by the account you kept. The pack survived. The marked paid. The throne authorized continuance. Daven did not deny it. That mattered more than rage. I inherited continuance, he said. Then, I let it stand. The snow den accepted it. Royal continuance admitted. Marked payment retained. Staff account active. Thessa's lips moved against the ice. Break the account. Not the door. Her voice was almost gone, but the den carried the shape of it along the oath line. Daven heard. Morcant did too. The Winterkeeper drove his staff into the threshold, and black frost surged over the bloodline. The condemned cannot instruct royal repair. Thessa's laugh was only breath. Still condemned because your staff keeps counting me. The hearth-record wolf lowered its broken head. The line between Thessa's mark and Daven's blood brightened, and the snow den read. Winterkeeper account challenged. Royal payer present. Marked payments held. Staff break required. Morcant's composure cracked into fury. Old Stone cannot command the Winterkeeper office. Daven stepped closer to the threshold. This time the warning did not flare against him, because he did not reach for the door. He reached for the staff. Morcant pulled it back. Too late. Daven's blood had already entered the threshold circle. The oath line rose from the floor like a white chain and wrapped around the silver staff, not binding Morcant's hand, but binding the account inside it. Names burned along the metal. Thessa saw her mother's name, Elena Brannor. For a moment, the cold lost its shape. Her mother had not vanished into winter misfortune. She had been counted, received, deferred. Thessa pressed both bound hands to the mark at her throat and whispered, Read her. The snow den answered. Elene Brannor entered. Marked witness sentenced. Royal debt reduced. Winterkeeper authority warmed. Daven's breath struck the door like pain. Morcant shouted, Those records are sealed. Daven's voice cut through him. Not anymore. He lifted his blade again, but he did not strike Morcant. He struck his own bloodline across the threshold. The white fire leapt. The staff screamed. Silver split down the center. Black frost poured from the crack. Then red-white flame followed, carrying names out of the metal and into the ice. The hearth-record wolf shattered completely into oath script. For one terrifying breath, Thessa thought the record had died. Then the words settled around her body, not as a cage but as witness standing. Winter oath line restored. Marked throats cleared. Royal debt reclaimed. Snow den blame void. The cold inside Thessa changed. It did not vanish. It loosened. The winter mark at her throat stopped burning like accusation and began to ache like an old scar that had finally been named correctly. Morcant staggered back, holding two broken halves of the staff. Majesty, without the staff, the winter accounts will flood the throne. Daven looked at him. Then the throne will hold what it owed. The snow den opened the threshold. Not because Daven broke it, because the record had secured the payer. The black pine door groaned inward. White oath fire withdrew from the floor in thin lines, revealing Thessa curled on the ice, wrists bound, lips blue, eyes open because she had refused to let the den turn her into another silent payment. Daven entered slowly. No guard followed. Morcant tried to step after him, but the broken oath line flared at his feet. Winterkeeper account void. Office under debt review. Morcant's face hardened. He did not confess. He did not beg. He only said, Northvale will freeze without old law. Thessa turned her head enough to look at him. Then build a law that does not need my throat. The snow den rang once. Witness standing entered. Daven knelt before her, keeping his hands where she could see them. May I cut the cord? Thessa looked at him, at his bleeding palm, at the doorway he had not broken until the record held, at the king whose silence had helped close the door and whose blood had finally named the debt. You paid the threshold, she said. You have not paid me. His face tightened. I know. Then remember that when the court calls this mercy, I will. Only then did she nod. Daven cut the hide cord from her wrists. He did not lift her until she reached for his arm herself. When she stood, her knees nearly failed. But he steadied without pulling her into him, letting her find her own balance on the floor that had almost kept her. The hearth-record wolf was gone. In its place, white oath lines ran beneath the ice toward Frostgate's royal hearths. One by one, beyond the den, the fires of Northvale began to return, not stolen from marked bodies, not fed through Morcant's staff, but lit from the debt the throne had finally claimed. Daven bowed his head before Thessa Brannor. Not before a chosen mate. Not before a hidden queen. Before the Winter Oath daughter whose family had died keeping a record the throne had buried under snow. I cannot undo 17 winters, he said. No, Thessa answered. I can answer for them. You will. The snow den behind them grew quiet. For the first time in living memory, its cold no longer searched for a marked throat to blame.